Nice to be here.
Nice.
Yeah, we've been doing this a few times over the years, so excellent to be here. And thanks everyone for being here. So we can talk a bit of payments and also, but more importantly, how to build, great companies from Europe. And Europe has been an outlier when it comes to payments. Think back on WorldPay, MasterCard from Europe, but of course, Klarna, Adyen, Wise, Stripe, European founders. Are there some benefits to start and scale a payment company from Europe, thinking about that there's actually, the banking single market? Is there a benefit, you think, from starting from here, or does it matter?
I have no idea. I know Stockholm has had fintech for a long period of time. Nasdaq was, a stock market, I think late 80s or something it was launched. But I don't know why payments companies, but to be honest, if you look at it, US is not regulated, so payments cost 150 to 200 basis points. Well, in Europe, it costs 20. So it kind of should be the other way around. But maybe we just forced to be very efficient, and that's why.
And there's obviously the fragmented market with different countries. Has that any impact?
Yeah, and I think, we are definitely, Klarna as an example, is a beneficiary of EU regulation because we have a bank license in Sweden that we can passport across Europe, and that was not possible before the union, right? So there's definitely things that have happened that had made it possible to build these companies.
Yeah, and another kind of key thing that I think is actually a competitive advantage for Europe is trust, and specifically when it comes to regulated market, like financial services. And now you also been, entered US a few years ago, and Australia and other markets. Is there kind of special, when it comes to corporate responsibility, regulation, what's your experience in that case, Europe versus US? Is that something that is, the two sides of it, regulation and trust, is that something that's been helpful and versus US and also other, through in other markets in the world as well?
I think definitely, at least it's funny when you think about a Swedish business contract. If I sign a contract in Sweden, it's going to be 2 pages. The same contract in the US is going to be 40 pages, right? So there's a very different approach to what to expect, and that is clear. But to be honest, right now, with all the things we're seeing, by the way, I really recommend the podcast from Economist called Scam Inc., which really kind of points to the tremendous rise we have of scams coming. And I think especially for societies like Sweden is a very high trust society, it is almost also as a consequence naive to the threats that are coming due to scams. And AI is obviously accelerating this. So I think unfortunately right now this trust is under quite heavy pressure.
Yes, so there are actors that take advantage of the trust, and therefore there's some naivety among maybe consumers and maybe regulators as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and interesting. And
I had a great example of that is we had an incident at Klarna where a journalist wrote on X, and then a fake account, a troll account, made a fake quote that argued that Klarna had exposure to Silicon Valley Bank when that happened. And the journalist, without checking this, retweeted that. And then journalists started writing about this as a fact, without anyone fact-checking with us, which is obviously for a financial institution quite risky, right? Because you can get consumers to interpret that as, I have to bring my money out or whatever, right? You can get a bank run as a consequence of that. And so that just shows the sensitivity that we have in this viral media society, and where media is also taking less fact checks and being less, tedious about these things than historically. So it's a definitely different landscape to be a bank than 20 years ago.
Yeah, and of course for Klarna, trust is paramount because you are dealing with money and also credit. And how do you deal with the kind of making sure that you have the trust, in particular both with the consumers but also with the merchants?
So to be a little bit nerdy fintech financial services, I actually think that it is changing because the promise of fintech must be to break the incumbents, and the excess profits that banks have delivered because we're stuck with our existing bank, because we're not willing to change banks and we sit with the bank that we have. And this means that they make a tremendous of too much big profits. And customer mobility, so the ability that AI can bring to allow us to switch very easily and say like, your financial digital assistant says, hey, I looked at your mortgage and I realized that I found a cheaper one, and you don't have to do any paperwork, I'll just do it for you. Would you like to save £20 a month? I think most people in here wouldn't be like, yeah, but I love Barclays. You're going to be like, yeah, of course, £20, awesome. I want to spend that on something I like. So the point is that I think we're going to see a tremendous increase in customer mobility. But the problem for financial services is customer mobility is also a risk, a stability risk. If everyone would just be able, and that's what we saw with Silicon Valley Bank, was that when all the customers could exit in a few hours, you can see a tremendous risk. So from our perspective, from Klarna, what we have done is we have simply secured the deposit base. So we have gone to our depositors and say, we'll pay you a premium and interest for locking the money up for 6 to 12 months as a way to insure us against that additional volatility that is now in the market because of social media, narratives, fake rumors. I don't know how many of you saw it, but it was actually, we reported quarterly recently, and a TikToker took that and said, Klarna is going bankrupt because their losses are up, which was entirely inaccurate because our payments volume is up. So, we're a slightly larger bank than last year. So we're going to have slightly larger losses.
Of course.
But that spread virally on TikTok.
Yeah.
And so suddenly we have everyone saying Klarna is going bankrupt. And and there's no way for us to what am I going to call the TikToker and say, please correct your statement? It's not going to really make a big difference. So it's a different world. And I think a lot of incumbent banks haven't yet fully woken up to that change.
Yeah. And of course, with AI, that's something that also kind of becomes even more.
Exactly. AI is going to make that switch so much easier, which is going to create exactly the competitive pressure that we want on the banks, right? So it's good. It's going to reduce the profits among banks, retail banks in particular, but it also has side effects. Yeah.
So on AI, you've been very vocal, and you were also a pioneer, I would say, when the LLMs came out with ChatGPT. I know you went to see Sam very early, tried to befriend him, and which you did, and you really went all in, also as a CEO, rather than said, or left it to the IT department or engineers, and you talked about it also, and we've seen in your numbers that you saved a lot of money on customer support, and there was this quote that was one AI agent that the same amount of work as 700 customer service agents. And then recently there was on Bloomberg reported that you kind of stepped back from that position. So I'd like to kind of double click on this a bit and explore this. Have your thinking about how you can use AI to bring efficiency in the organization? Have you kind of changed your position on that, and what is your perspective now when you've been experimenting for a while?
No, look, my wife taught me something fantastic, which is two things can be true at the same point of time, and it has helped in a lot of our quarrels. Actually, it's a very healthy thing to remember in a relationship. And however, media doesn't always deal well with two messages at the same point of time. And we tried to tell Bloomberg a story, and then, it was portrayed slightly differently. What I wanted to say, and what we wanted to say, was that we definitely see, we were 5,500 people 2 years ago. We're 3,000 people now. We've shrank the company with 40%. Our revenue per employee has gone from $400,000 to almost $1 million. That's not all AI. A lot of it is other efficiency gains. It's not all AI, but it's semi-AI connected. The customer service story is true. We took our AI agent live. It reduced the number of agents we needed with about 700, but those work for Teleperformance and other companies, so they still have their jobs to just working for other companies. And then in addition to that, what we've done at Klarna is we've told all of our employees 2 years ago, we're not hiring, we've stopped recruiting. This means that our total salary cost will go down, but we're going to reinvest the majority of that, or a big piece of that, into an acceleration of our employees' compensation. So their cash and equity compensation has accelerated in the last 2 years to what we have been able to do historically. So within Klarna, I would say our employees are winners, But obviously in society, it is a problem. And we have also tried to be very honest about the fact that, like, I don't want to be one of the tech CEOs that are like, yeah, no worries, everything's going to be fine. Because I do think there will be major implications for white-collar jobs. Yeah. And so I want to be honest about it. We want to be honest about it. Yeah. That's coming. Now, with the human, the point was also, I mean, in our hometown, you and I come from Uppsala, there used to be a shoe factory. And in that shoe factory, there used to be people that would actually do shoes manually. It was called a factory, but they were basically doing manual labor. Now, eventually, there were machines that came that could help at least do part of that shoe. And those machines got better and better. We have had thousands of people that, for example, have handcrafted code. Handcrafted, written every line manually.
Oh, wait, they used to do that?
Right?
They used to do that?
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, okay.
So the point is now there's a machine that can produce out code. And obviously, as the first shoemaking machine, the quality is so-so. Yeah. But the difference is, as that machine gets better, before in the shoe factory, you had to install a new one, took a decade to upgrade it or whatever. Every 6 months, that machine is getting better and better. So is it likely that people will still handcraft? When you can manufacture code, images, text, videos in a machine, what it means is that there will be less to do. Yeah. And what we, however, also emphasized is that if you look at healthcare, as an example, what are the kind of jobs in healthcare? Well, I hope that AI will mean more doctors, more nurses, more presence with the patients, less admin, right? And that the bureaucracy, if you look at Sweden as an example, the number of people in healthcare that are employed in doing admin work has grown like 3x, while doctors has grown 1.2x or something. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity to actually bring that. And that's what we wanted to communicate. We realize as a company, we think offering human customer service is almost going to be like a VIP thing. Yeah. It's going to be like, hey, just like we pay extra for humanly crafted things that some person has done rather than some cheap factory at a low cost, you're going to pay and think it's a benefit to be able to have a human connection. So we think that two things can be true at the same point of time. We can use AI to automate and take away boring jobs, things that are manual labor, but we also going to promise our customers to have a human connection. Yeah. And now then Bloomberg kind of, did what Bloomberg does and other news media sometimes. They simplify that message a little bit.
They need headlines.
Yeah.
And I think you also posted a tweet on X, can you say that? That now you kind of balanced, so about 50% of your staff are engineers, but you used to be like, whatever, 25%. And, but how do you think this is evolving? Because you talked about that people are handwriting code, but now we have, of course, AI doing that for us as well. Do you think that as you scale, how will the balance of the staff be? And will you need fewer engineers? And what kind of engineers? Will it be prompt engineers? Will it be, you know?
I think that what I'm seeing internally is that we were 5,500 people, whereof 1,500 were engineers 2 years ago. We have 1,500 engineers today. Some people have left, new people have been recruited. So what's really shrank is all the other jobs, legal, marketing, all the other stuff. Now, I do think that may shift, because what I'm seeing internally is a new rise of business people that are coding themselves, more or less. Not necessarily the most advanced stuff, but they're writing business logic. Yeah. And the challenge the engineers have is some of them are very business savvy, but a lot of them have allowed themselves to be isolated with technical challenges only and not been that interested in what the business actually does. So they've been more focused on solving how much AWS are we using and how can we reduce that or whatever, right? And so the point is that what I'm now seeing is, if I would look at the people that have really accelerated their careers at Klarna, and the people that are really is business people that have learned to code. Because they can take their business understanding and turn it into deterministic or probabilistic statements with the AI. So I think that category of people will become even more valuable going forward. And it might be that currently we are only hiring engineers, a little bit of engineers. We're not hiring at all in the other categories. It might be that in 6 to 12 months it starts shifting in the other way. So I think there's a huge promise there. And I think the engineers really need to step up and make sure they understand the business.
They need to understand the business, exactly. So on that, I know you spend a lot of time yourself, so you went to business school, you were not an engineer, and when you start, when Klarna was when you built your first code base, it was outsourced in Erlang, and no one knew to do that, and you had a few issues, but you borrowed that. But now you actually spending time. I know that you told me that you've been spending all the time learning how to use this no code and to actually go down deep into this.
Well, I think that, like, to me, it was just an eye opener that, like, I realized that for the first 19 years of Klarna's existence, or 18, I would be in a mock-up Figma discussion, I would be in a sales discussion, marketing discussion. The second we started talking about databases, I would be like, good luck, guys. You know, and I felt always that that was a downside for Klarna.
Yeah.
And that was a bad thing, but there was like just no way realistically I was going to catch up.
Yeah.
Now I take, and I say, please open the code. I take that code, I drop it in ChatGPT, say, explain. Right? And then I understand, okay, but this is not really what we want to do as a business. You know, what does this code actually do?
Yeah.
And I started learning about databases, and if I'm like, hey, what is SQL? Then I go to ChatGPT and say, what is SQL? Right? Like, so it suddenly opened my eyes to the fact that I can learn these things because I have a private tutor who can tell me. And I can challenge discussions internally. Say, you're saying this and that, I'll take a Slack thread, I'll throw it in ChatGPT and say, does this make sense? Right? So suddenly I can be dangerous in these discussions, which is, I think, a good thing, because you want to challenge people, make sure that it makes sense, and so forth, and participate. And then obviously you have to be humble about the fact that ChatGPT will be wrong, and there'll be hallucinations, and that I'm still not an engineer. I haven't actually coded. I haven't put a system into production. So, but I think it's made us a better company.
Yeah.
I think we're doing better stuff due to being willing to kind of step into that zone.
Yeah, and I also know that you've kind of been quite radical in terms of your enterprise software systems, and how you've been thinking about using AI and data internally to understand the business. You know, you've thrown out a few of your big vendors. And,
yep.
And so give us an update on how that is, because it seemed to be, to me, like a pretty big experiment.
Yes.
Which is cool.
I wouldn't call it experiment, though. No, but I think, basically, remember when ChatGPT came, there was this like trend for the people that were nerdy like me following these things, which said that, like, amazing, now the AI can read all my PDFs, you know, and the thing is that what we concluded fairly quickly is that there's a rule among data scientists that says shit in, shit out, right? And that is as true in AI as it was before. So if I just take Klarna as an example, we have a customer relationship, we work with Sephora. If I historically looked at all the data that existed in Klarna as an organization about our relationship with Sephora, I'd have to go to Salesforce, I'll have to go to Slack, I'll have to go to emails, I'll have to go to Calendar, I'll have to go to Google Docs, I'll have to go to Google Slides. There is a proliferation of data about our relationship that sits spread out. And it's inconsistent, and it has errors, and it has tons of shit, basically. So the point is that what we realize is that the only way forward is going to be to consolidate that, put that in one place, clean that, in order for us to be able to then put AI on top of that and make sense out of it. There's no way. Now, obviously, we can use AI to help us accelerate the cleaning and the standardization of that information in order to allow us to create that value. We don't have to sit manually and go through all of that stuff. But it is unavoidable to come to a conclusion about what is the truth about our relationship with Sephora. And so that's why we took out Salesforce, we took out Workday, and to be honest, we counted it, there's 1,200 small software as a service things that we have closed down at Klarna. Some of them were like plugins to Jira or whatever. To be honest, like Atlassian is on my target list because Jira is not my favorite piece of software. So it is for that reason. It's not because we think that this is is some kind of the software license cost for Salesforce in Klarna was about, I think it was $2 million or something. So obviously that's a nice saving, but it's not for a company making $3 billion in revenue. It's not like, my investors are not going to make cheerleaders of that, right? So it is not for that purpose. And I think Salesforce may be very well a very successful company and figure this out. But to us, at least, it was very clear that we needed it in one place.
Yeah. Cool. We could spend a lot of time on this, but we need to move on. We don't have so much time. Of course, I have to ask you about the IPO. You filed your S1, and then there was, been a bit of a turbulence in the market. What's anything you can share with us?
I can say that I'm happy there's less turbulence in the market.
Excellent. So am I. We're going to just wrap up with the last question. I know we're over time, but I need to ask you about this because you're one of the outlier founders, building a really global company from Europe, billions of euros in revenue, scaling, at some point going to go public, and you continue to run this company, and you told me this is what you're going to do, at least for foreseeable future, maybe for the rest of your career. So I think you're really become really a role model for a lot of entrepreneurs who are younger and starting their companies.
As you were for me, my friend.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. But I think also, so I think entrepreneurs got the message. They're like scaling companies, building companies. There are more companies starting companies in Europe than any other region. But if we would talk about the policymakers in Europe, the politicians and those who are setting the rules, and because tech is now a real impact on GDP, on job sovereignty, and all those kind of things that are important. What would be the one, if this had a magic wand, and you could change one thing about, regulation or anything else in Europe, what would that be?
If I would have a magic wand, there's one thing that I would do. I wanted to. Some of you will remember there was a song called "Please don't go away." That was how I felt when Brexit happened. And if I had a magic wand, I would make UK part of EU again. Because I really miss you guys. I think I love UK. I love the business focus here. I love everything about the UK, and I would love for it to be part of the European community.
Yeah, I think probably a lot of people agree on that. I certainly agree on that. On that note, Sebastian, thank you so much for speaking with me and speaking with us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.